Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Modern Firm. I'm your host, Noah Scher, and today I'm joined by William Morgan, founder of Penny Lane Equity and Auxily, along with his business partner, Sam Chopra. Together, they've taken lessons from decades in high stakes environments, including the nuclear energy world, and applied them to help companies scale. William, Sam, it's great to both have you here today.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. So I'd love to dive right in. William, your background is very unique, 20 plus years in nuclear operations and large scale infrastructure. So I'd love if you guys can both each kind of give us a little bit more about your background and how you guys came to be today.
Okay, well, I'll start. Yeah, so, my background is in nuclear power. So while I was working in that career, I would have sort of a hobby to invest in real estate, sort of on the side. And so, and that sort of business grew on its own, but I was able to contrast the business world to, the nuclear industry, which is very rigid, very structured, and I could see some of the gaps, I think, between the two and how many business owners weren't, they didn't benefit from structure and their business systems and processes were often lacking. So I brought some of that background and experience into, my business, and it's done wonderful things for us. And it's been our philosophy going forward is to have a systems-based business and using some of the same lessons learned and best practices that I learned in the nuclear industry.
Yeah, totally. I always love hearing people's stories. Was there kind of a moment where you kind of were just like, hey, I want to start the business, or was it kind of a culmination over time?
Yeah, so uh, in the facility I was working at, actually in 2015, announced that they were going to close. So, I live in the West Coast, California, and I really like living here. I didn't want to have to move to a new nuclear facility. Most of these facilities are, in the Midwest, in the middle of a cow pasture, and I wanted to stay in California. So that was really the impetus for me to, begin taking my business seriously and start scaling it. So it wasn't just a part-time hobby. And that's what I did. And so we scaled our real estate development company, and it quickly revealed some additional things that we needed as a business owner to be successful. So
No,
uh,
totally. I mean, a lot of people in your shoes probably would, taken the safe option and maybe just moved and stayed in their job. So I like
yeah,
that you took the risk and, it made the business. So,
right.
Sam, I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I'm right now, whatever I'm doing, I love it, but it's actually by accident, which I discovered because I have a computer science background. And so initially, I started to work for a US real estate broker. I went in to help with their IT, and then I realized that most businesses struggle with operations. And so then from there, it completely shifted. So I became operations because I'm more like an analytics guy, very good with numbers and projections. Uh, and so they put me into operations and management. So I have about 14 years experience working with various businesses, help them develop back office operations, accounting, uh, and as well as marketing.
Very
Uh,
nice.
so yeah, it's kind of funny. Like I have a computer science background, but I'm more into like business management and accounting
Yeah.
full time. And I worked with 120 businesses and still counting. But yeah, I help with operations and accounting.
Yeah, that reminds me of my dad actually. He started in electrical engineering and then he switched over to project management. So it's such an unrelated field, but you go where you go and you get experience in different fields and why not stick with that, right? So William, you've built two companies, Penny Lane Equity and Auxily, and
Yes.
they complement each other, if I'm not mistaken, right? So can you kind of walk us through how they came to life and how they, are working together?
Yeah, sure. So, sort of a continuation of what I was referring to earlier. Our business started to grow once we put a focus on scaling. And when you do scale your business, you do start to see, cracks form, right? You see where your weaknesses are, and the problems that might have been small at a smaller level are now larger at a larger scale. So, and one of those issues was our books. our bookkeeper and our CPA, we outgrew them relatively quickly. And, ours is a very dynamic business. We do lots of large size projects. And if you don't account for those correctly, it can really obscure the rest of everything else that's going on in your business, right? You don't have necessarily the vision across your business because you have these large transactions coming in and out of your books. So how are you going to know if you're spending too much on marketing or if you're going over budget on one project, versus what you estimated? So that was very frustrating to me. And we had to correct it because I felt like I was flying blind. And that's sort of how Sam and I have got together. We brought in sort of the experts to help us first clean up our business books, our finances, but then use that same information. And I think this is a gap out there in the industry, but using that same information, not just for tax filing, but to instruct the business owner so that you can see across your business in the granularity you need to know what you're doing right and to know what you're doing wrong. So that when we brought that in-house and we started looking at our business from that angle, we realized that many of our peers needed the same type of help. And that was the birth of Oxalate.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you. Especially, I want to touch on that. So many small business owners, are maybe great at whatever the business they're running, but they think they could just do it all, right? And they look at, the accounting and bookkeeping and the book side of things as kind of an overthought. But
Yeah.
I am of the belief that, like the phrase, stick to your own lane, do what you're good at, and then what you're not good at,
Right.
outsource and have other people come in and do what they're good at. So that's the real driver of growth. Because if you try to do everything yourself, you're going to get burnt out. You're not going to last long.
Yeah. The phrase I like to use is, you work your strengths and hire your weaknesses.
That's a good one. Yeah, absolutely. So from you guys' experience, working in firms in construction and real estate and other, project driven industries, what are some of the most, I guess, common mistakes that you guys see, and how do you guys come in and kind of resolve those?
Well, I'll start and then Sam, you can add. But what we see is typically when we work with a business, they have, just like every business, we all have to wear a lot of hats in the beginning, right? We may not have, like a larger business, all these different departments that specialize in one little aspect of the business. So, business owners are trying to do a lot of things at once. And typically what we see happening is they're not as organized as they need to be. And what got them to where they are is not going to get them to where they want to be. So that sheer effort to put meat on the table, get business coming in the door, handle problems as they come up, you absolutely need that when you're starting a business. But then a lot of them have not had the time to go back and organize their business, to structure it with systems and processes, to organize their finances in a way that can really tell them what's working and what's not working. That's what we find. The back end structure and organization in the business seems to be lacking in the beginning for a business. And that's usually when they reach out to us for help.
Is it usually more of an issue of, not having the right processes, or, not having enough people, or maybe both?
It's usually a combination of people, of processes, and maybe the underutilization of technology. Those are the three things we see. Processes, it takes you longer to complete a task if you're also trying to build out a process at the same time. Once you do that, it's done forever. You have your processes, and what it enables you to do is when you make your business a systems oriented business, then you can take ordinary people and enable them to do extraordinary things. Rather than relying on that star player talent, that one great hire that's going to take you to the next level, that's great. It works. And I see the appeal, but as soon as that person leaves, you're left with a big hole in your company again. So developing systems, I find that is the number one thing that is lacking. And that is what is needed for a business to scale without scaling their problems. Because typically when we find a business, they've scaled, but they've also scaled their problems, and they spend all their time putting out fires and working on their problems that they just cannot get to that next level.
Yeah, that's actually a good thinking. I didn't think about it like that. Yeah, when you have good systems in place, no matter who leaves and who comes in, the
Right.
systems are still running anyways. Yeah, totally. Tying into my next question, this could either be for Sam or for you, William, is I would love to get into kind of offshoring. There's kind of a negative stigma around it sometimes. And I know you guys are for offshoring the right way, right?
Yes.
with high level talent and systems behind it, obviously, and whatnot. So, what is the secret to actually, finding good outsourcing, and how do you go about that?
Well, we've tried it all in the past, so we can learn a lot from our mistakes in the past. But what we found, the great combination for offshoring, in my opinion, is to not to try to, to attract top talent. It's just like anywhere else. You want to pay very well. You want to have a conducive work environment, benefits. All of those things are what talented people are looking for. So that's what we're able to do from an offshore location. And, so having a facility that has, data security, that has, great oversight, that has an excellent culture to work with where people can show up and want to work. That's what we find is different. You can hire a virtual assistant and they can work from anywhere in the world, but we've done that. We find there's a lack of consistency. Sometimes that you're not sure what's happening. Maybe they're working somewhere else while they're working for you, things like that. So we find having a stable, productive workplace for people to show up is essential. And then paying very well with great benefits allows you to attract top talent. So that combination right there has worked very well for us.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
It's
and I
more of a
think
partnership. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
infrastructure and oversight is also something you need because I was on a meeting with one of the CPAs today, and he had hired a virtual assistant, and she was going on and off during meetings like 4 times, and she said, "Oh, I was having issues with my," and then offline I asked him like, "Hey, uh, do we want to send her the recording or something, or is it something?" I think those little things, the infrastructure and internet and all that stuff, that also raise a lot of questions about data security, especially when you're working, on accounts and dealing with sensitive information. I think we need to also look at infrastructure and data security when you're hiring offshore.
Yeah, absolutely. So more looking at it like a partnership as well, and not just being a vendor, right? I think that's
Right.
kind of where the culture's going. People, especially even when it comes to, let's say, for example, bookkeeping firms. No one wants to just have a bookkeeping firm who's handing you a report and not explaining what any of it
You're
means,
right.
right? Like, what the hell does any of this mean? So
Exactly right.
going towards partnerships and long-term relationships versus just selling a service
Yeah.
is what people have been finding success with. Totally.
And that's, we're very passionate about that. We don't work with just anyone. We want, we want to be the competitive advantage for our clients. We want to be the reason that they stand out amongst their peers. And so, yeah, look, when we come into a business, we want to be the reason that they succeed. So it's not just, placing personnel or developing AI solutions or, we could do all of that. But what really drives us is when we see a business internalize some of our advice and we do a needs analysis. And when they start implementing some of the fixes and watching them rise to that next level of business, that is so satisfying.
Priceless. Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, they'll try to be vendors and just sell, and that might be good in the short term, to get some money. But if you actually want to be successful long term, I saw a quote the other day. It was like, making other people successful will make you successful, right? So
Exactly right.
when you bring people up, no one's gonna hopefully people won't forget you, when they're up. So, um, kind of switching gears here. When you guys first step into a business, right? What's the first thing that you kind of look at to see what the breakdown is and to know, where to go and where to start? What's the first thing to look at?
Well, we'll only work with one business at a time, maybe two, but the first thing we do is we call it needs analysis. There's different things we look at. Every client is different in what they need, and that usually reflects the personality of the principals. So we're just kind of going eyes wide open for the first 2-3 weeks. But what we look for is we look for consistency of communication across all of their team. We look for robust processes, and we look for principals that understand their business. Right? They should understand where their money is going, how much money is available, right? For payroll, for overhead, or for new projects, right? If they know that, if they have that level of detail, that's what we look for. And so, we look at across all of their business to see where the gaps are. And then we'll come up with some proposed solutions.
Totally. Do you think there's any, systems or tools that any business or that every business should implement regardless of size, or is it truly conducive to, diagnosing with every single business? Or is there
Yeah, well,
yeah,
No, it's not the same with every business, that's for sure. So a lot of businesses will use a work management system. In construction companies, they'll use things, you probably won't recognize these platforms, but Procore and Builder Trend, these organize, those are work management systems specifically for that industry. They're great. They do everything you need as a business, but business owners typically only utilize them 10 to 15% of their capabilities. So again, they're putting out fires, they're running their business, they're trying to get new business, they're dealing with employee issues. Sitting down and taking the time to learn their work management system doesn't happen. So we see that a lot. We see they do have the right tools, they're just not utilizing them to their fullest. We also see, I think all of us are aware of the impact that technology is having, particularly with AI. And I think it behooves every business owner to pay attention, right? To pay attention, because if you're not taking advantages of the new capabilities that are coming online with some of these new models, your competitors will be, and the productivity savings can be substantial if you know how
Oh,
to use them
absolutely.
correctly.
Oh, 100%. I mean, for example, the business that I run, me and a couple of colleagues, we run a business where we help firm owners implement AI. And the
Right.
biggest concern we get every single time is, these firm owners will think that AI is going to make me obsolete. Or, they think they're going to lose their job or lose their firm. And what we tell them is that people are going nowhere, right? In any industry. I mean,
Right.
sure, there are certain workflows that are going to be erased with AI, but people as
Right.
a whole, industries are not going to go anywhere. It's just leveraging technology, right? Like same thing with the internet. When the internet came out, everyone thought it was, going to be this crazy thing, and there were firms that were hesitant to adopt it and whatnot.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they were forced to later on. So
Yeah.
just staying ahead of it is the best thing that you could do at this
And to
point.
be fair, things will change.
Yeah.
Like even, with the advent of the internet, we saw some old business models, the brick and mortar business model changed, and those who did not change with it were left behind.
Hmm.
So, Sears or Kmart, right? Those are brick and mortars are very successful, but they did not stay ahead of the curve when it comes to technology. And even Walmart was a little slow in implementing their online presence and were almost taken out by Amazon. They were certainly threatened at one point in time. It aided to a lot of their revenue stream, but it was a matter of survival that everyone had to embrace the new capabilities that were brought to the market. And I think the same phenomenon is true with AI and other technology solutions.
Exactly. With any technology, it's just about adapting and pivoting. It's not, there's when you get out of that fear mentality, you can actually start using it and making progress. So my dad actually worked at Kmart back in the day, and I remember
Oh yeah.
him tell, yeah, it was so sad when they went under. But
Yeah.
kind of transitioning here, guys. So I'd love to learn a little bit more, kind of about the outsourcing stuff. You're running operations across the U.S. and India, but you guys have tight teams and everything is still
Yes.
aligned. How are you guys able to kind of pull that off? And what advice would you give to people who are struggling to have that good connection and that good relationship?
Well, we've done a lot of the work. We've made a lot of the mistakes, and we found a strategy that works well. So, we believe that every business can benefit from knowing their finances, having operational support, and even marketing supports. And we provide all of those services at a cost that is significantly less than if they were to hire locally. And we believe the um, performance is much better because we attract great talent and we arm them with our processes and our technological innovations for companies. So they're not just an employee that shows up for work. There's a whole ecosystem behind them that helps a business.
Yeah, and I think I want to clarify that we have a presence in both the countries. We have our infrastructure, we have a business, and technically we are building back offices so that other small businesses can work with, either they can go and hire somebody like a VA type, or they can hire an offshore employee, where, companies like us help them hire and source and place people in our infrastructure. So technically, I think we were able to do, again, like Will said, we tried so many models, then we thought that the best way to do that is to have the presence in that country so we have control of who we hire and provide the quality, can meet our standards with quality. And also it protects us with the data and security. Then we thought, okay, so can every businesses do that? Like, can they go and build the infrastructure and provide all that? I think maybe some can do, not everyone can afford to do that. So then we thought maybe we offer that as a platform to other business owners who want to, outsource, right? Their operations or something. So we call it like kind of a back office setup, so which we offer. But yeah, so as far as what we have done is we've built a back office solution.
Yeah. I think
And
that's
and
sorry, go
we
ahead.
yeah, we find typically we'll see businesses typically at the $50 million revenue mark and above. That's when they start to look to take advantage of offshore talent
Hmm.
or establish a location. That's typically when it starts because it's not very easy to do. It takes quite a bit to develop a location, a facility, and all of the other the bank accounts, the corporate entities, interfacing with the local government. That takes a lot. And so sort of, that's an advantage that businesses at a certain level can take advantage of, but the medium and small size businesses have been sort of locked out of that because it's just such an undertaking. Well, that's what we're able to provide. We're serving the medium and smaller businesses with their own back office at our facility.
Yeah. Totally, and I think that it's a very, very valuable relationship that has, I mean, the trends of outsourcing and, building those partnerships has been exploding in the last few years, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, and it's a combination for us. We're U.S. based and off. We do have offshore facilities. Uh, but there are certain job roles that are available to the best talent that can be found. In other words, they don't have to be geographically located right where you are. Definitely some positions that require boots on the ground, person locally, and for those, absolutely. But for other types of job roles, we are able to provide really high quality people with a backdrop of support.
Exactly, and I think it comes on the mindset. A lot of people think that if it's someone's not, on the physical floor, then it's not as good of work. And I think we kind of saw the shift from that to being more virtual after COVID, right? Like my dad has not gone back in the office since 2020. He told me so it's
Yeah,
like, everything he does is remote. And I think we're in a virtual world, so there's no need to like have to be in person, unless, like you said, it's a specific job that needs
yeah.
to be in person, obviously. But for a lot of jobs in this day and age, it could be totally virtual and still deliver
Yes,
excellent work, and it doesn't hurt the value of the work, or the
absolutely.
quality of the work at all. So totally agree there. Guys, last question for you is, what is your guys' advice to anyone who wants to start a business but has no idea where to start? They're very overwhelmed in the landscape in this world, whether it's tariffs or ever evolving technology, or all these people that are telling them maybe not to do it. What is your advice to someone in that situation?
My advice always is to take action. We create our own limitations. If you take action, you will learn what it takes to succeed in business. You're going to fail, and that's okay. You learn the most from your failures. You just try not to fail big. But yeah, that's my advice. Take action, ask around, get some good mentorship. That's very important, and that doesn't have to always cost you money. There's a lot of mature business leaders in every community. I recommend tapping into that and get out there and make it happen. That's my advice.
Yeah. That's great advice. I feel like so many people want to have a perfect plan before they start and
Right.
have everything, and that's never going to happen. So take the leap and see where you land, right?
Right.
Yeah, and
Totally.
I would also add that don't become your own employer, right? Because if they are building the business, again, I work with over 120 businesses. One thing I've seen is they become their own limitation, right? Bottleneck. So what that means is, like you mentioned, in the beginning of this podcast, they need to hire the right people instead of becoming a star player themselves. So try to uh, build departments, again, make it systems and process based, and hire the right people instead of you doing everything yourself. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. I mean, that's the reason I think most people who start businesses is to eventually, not be their own boss and eventually be able to get out of it. So obviously there's years and years where you have to make sacrifices and work even, and maybe you have to be a slave to the business, but eventually you want to get out of it, and kind of just be delegating. So I agree with that there. William and Sam, for anyone who wants to reach out to you guys to maybe learn a little bit more about your business or just connect with you guys, where's the best place they can find you at?
Sure. Our website is Auxilee, AUXILEE.com. And feel free to reach out to us there.
And they can email us on admin@oxley.com.
Perfect. Yeah. No, we'll leave everything in the show notes. And to any business owner who needs some clarity on these topics, please reach out to William and Sam, and we'll get you guys right. Thank you, gentlemen. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Noah.
Of course.